In Savannah, in the summer of 1875, a house began to bleed. The air hung thick and heavy, a suffocating blanket of southern heat you could taste. All day, the buzz of cicadas was a constant, high-pitched scream, a soundtrack to the sweltering stillness. At night, the world shrank to the soft hiss of gas-lit streets, the lonely clatter of horse hooves on cobblestone echoing through the sleeping city. It was on one such night that the trouble began, at a grand home on Bull Street, a place of white columns and dark, shuttered windows that always seemed to be watching. The house belonged to the Weatherby family, wealthy cotton merchants who had built it just a decade prior. It was their pride, a symbol of their standing. But symbols can tarnish. At dawn, a neighbor out for an early walk was the first to see it. A dark, crimson stain, like a fresh wound, seeping through the pristine white paint on the western wall. He assumed it was a prank, some sort of vandalism. Later that morning, Mr. Weatherby himself saw it and cursed the local youths, immediately dispatching a painter to cover the blemish. The painter worked all morning under the oppressive sun, applying coat after coat until the house was immaculate once more. But the next morning, the stain was back, larger this time, and a deeper, more disturbing shade of red. Again, the painters came, and again, the next day, the stain returned, a stubborn, spreading blotch against the white facade. People began to talk. They stopped calling it paint. It was something else, something that kept coming back, no matter how desperately they tried to hide it. The fear that began outside soon crept its way indoors. It started with the servants. A housemaid, while dusting the parlor, felt a single, cold drop land on the back of her hand. She looked up at the ornate plaster ceiling, but saw nothing. No leak, no crack, just pristine white. But the drop was red. A few days later, the butler noticed dark streaks crawling down the floral wallpaper in the main hallway overnight, like ink bleeding through paper. They weren't there when he'd locked up the house, but they were there in the morning, stark and undeniable. Then came the smell, a faint, coppery tang that clung to the air, strongest in the upstairs bedrooms, the scent of iron, of old blood. The servants, who knew the city's whispers and superstitions, grew uneasy. They started refusing to enter certain rooms alone. The nursery, which had been empty for years, was the first to be abandoned. Then the master study. Soon, entire wings of the house fell silent, coated in a fine layer of dust and a thick layer of dread. Desperate, Mr. Weatherby called for Dr. Miller, a man of science and logic. The doctor spent an entire day investigating the house, tapping on walls, examining the stains, and sniffing the air with a skeptical frown. He collected samples of the seeping substance, taking them back to his office for analysis. His conclusion was baffling. It was blood, human blood. Yet, he declared with absolute certainty that there were no bodies hidden in the walls, no injuries among the residents or staff, no rational explanation for its presence. The house was structurally sound. The family was physically unharmed. His science had failed him. Frustrated and unnerved, the Weatherbys turned from science to faith. They summoned Father Michael from the cathedral, a weary old priest with eyes that had seen too much of the world's darkness. He walked the silent halls, his crucifix clutched in his hand, the air growing colder as he moved from room to room. He didn't offer prayers or perform an exorcism. He simply stood in the grand foyer, his gaze fixed on the ceiling, and whispered a sentence that would haunt the family forever. Houses remember what people try to forget. The haunting escalated. The drips from the ceiling became more frequent, no longer single drops but a slow, steady patter in the dead of night. The dark streaks on the wallpaper multiplied, weaving intricate, map-like patterns that seemed to shift and change when no one was looking. The smell of iron was now a permanent, stomach-churning stench that no amount of open windows or burning incense could erase. The family began to hear things, the faint sound of weeping, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Floorboards groaning overhead in rooms they knew were empty. The servants, one by one, packed their belongings and fled, leaving the Weatherbys to face the growing malevolence alone. They were prisoners in their own magnificent home, trapped by a presence that was slowly, methodically driving them mad. They boarded up windows and locked doors, but it was useless. The horror wasn't trying to get in. It was already there. It was the house itself. Then came the storm, a violent, midsummer squall that descended upon Savannah with biblical fury. Thunder rattled the window panes and lightning lit the sky in fractured, terrifying flashes. Inside the Weatherby house, the storm was not just outside, but within. The walls of the parlor began to pulse, a slow, rhythmic throbbing like a giant, beating heart. With each pulse, the crimson stains darkened, swelling as if gorged. The sound of footsteps echoed from the empty upstairs hallways, heavy and deliberate, pacing back and forth, and then a new sound cut through the roar of the storm, the clear, terrified sob of a child, seeming to emanate from inside the very walls around them. The sound was so close, so filled with anguish, it was unbearable. Suddenly, from the end of the hall, the door to the old nursery slammed shut with a deafening crack that shook the entire house. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the storm and their own ragged breathing. Slowly, cautiously, Mr. Weatherby led his family toward the parlor, the source of the rhythmic pulsing. He pushed the heavy oak door open. The air that rushed out was freezing cold and thick with the coppery smell of a slaughterhouse. The floor, the entire expensive Persian rug, was soaked, glistening and dark in the flickering lamplight. Not with rainwater from a leak. It was something much, much thicker. At sunrise, the storm had passed. A strange, eerie calm fell over the house. Inside, it was dried spotless. The walls were clean, the wallpaper pristine. The rug in the parlor showed no sign of the night's horrific flood. The air was fresh, the metallic smell completely gone. It was as if the nightmare had never happened. The house was silent, too silent. That same day, the Weatherby family packed a single carriage with what little they could carry and left, never to return. The house on Bull Street sat empty for months, its shuttered windows like closed eyes. Eventually, it was sold to a new family, newcomers from the north, unaware of the whispers and the legends that now clung to the property like ivy. They were thrilled with their purchase, a grand southern home for a bargain price. On their first evening, as the wife stood in the foyer admiring the soaring ceiling, she felt a single, cold drop land on her cheek. She wiped it away with her finger and looked. It was red. She looked up. High above, from the center of a flawless plaster ceiling that held no pipes, no attic, and no explanation, a single drop of blood began to form, swell, and fall again. Some homes are built on land. Others are built on secrets. If this haunted legend unsettled you, like, share, and follow Hollow Voice for more forgotten horrors.